going on, listeners? Welcome back to another episode of the Unfounded Podcast. My name is Christopher Turner, and I am your host. I hope you're doing well today. I hope you're feeling good. I hope coronavirus doesn't have you down. This thing seems like it's going to never end, huh? That's how I'm feeling, at least. I hope you're not feeling the same. Excuse me. It is Friday morning now, I guess. Yeah, Friday morning, about 10 in the morning here for me in Las Vegas, Nevada. Beautiful day today. It's a little warm, actually. I just got done taking Dixie for a walk, and I had a sweat going at the end of it. So definitely a little bit warmer than it's been the last couple weeks. But hey, you know what? It's the desert. What did I expect, right? I am missing those Colorado summers right now for sure. Anyway, I wanted to get back on here. I hadn't been on here, I think, since Monday, and kind of yell at you a little bit, get some more ideas out. So I've been watching a lot of YouTube recently. I watch a lot of different news channels on there, and then I have kind of a big news feed that I've curated over the years, kind of through content that I enjoy, things like that. So there's a lot of documentaries I get through there and things like that. And one of the things I came across the other day, it was really interesting. It was actually a documentary on Seattle, and it was from one of the news stations, the local news stations, and it was titled "Seattle is Dying." If anybody's interested in this at all or anything I'm about to talk about, definitely check out the work. I'll try to post a link to it in the show notes so you can check it out yourself. But it's a kind of real in-depth documentary and look at kind of what's going on in Seattle and kind of the difficulties they're having with homelessness, but also how that relates to other issues, other social issues. And one of, I think, it's a good kind of, what's the word I'm trying to look for? It's a good example of kind of how we can go wrong in just assuming that the best thing to do for people is care for them. Because I gotta let me define what I mean by care. I'm using kind of like the more the soft version of it, right? Like caring in that do no harm ever, right? And so it leads to this idea that people just need to be saved from the systems that have corrupted them and the environments that have led them astray, right? That there's no culpability within the individual themselves, that it's all kind of an external process. And this is kind of the bet that Seattle has made over the last 20 years or so. And this is what this documentary outlines, is kind of the downfall and the growth of this homeless problem. But not only a homelessness problem, also a crime problem, right? A drug problem. There's I don't want to go into too much detail. I'll let you watch the documentary for yourself. But essentially what it lays out is kind of this growing problem where Seattle has become, I forget what the word was. There was one part in it where this guy had this nickname for Seattle. It was Freeattle, that's it. And it's gotten this connotation as a place where you can go if you're down on your luck, essentially, and you'll get free things, right? You'll get free housing. They'll give you a tent. They'll give you free food. And the other idea is too that there's not a lot of culpability within the legal system. That the legal system has been it's been defanged in a sense, and so police within Seattle don't have the ability to kind of do much against the homeless problem, right? And I don't mean to sound cold when I say homeless problem, right? Because I understand that homelessness is an issue that's close to us right now everywhere. It's a hard issue to deal with. It's a human issue, right? But it really does get down to this idea, this fundamental idea, and I think this is why I'm bringing it up. It's like, do you believe that people are fundamentally good or bad? Right. This is kind of what your this is what I think grows your political view. This is what each political party is kind of seizing on when they try to pull you over to their side. Is, do you think that people are inherently good, or do you think people are inherently bad? If you think people are inherently good, a lot of the ideas, the political ideas that grow out of that will come. You'll see how it lines up on one side of the aisle, right? Same for the other, right? So, and an example of that would be like. I think you can see it within. I'm trying to think here. Really, I was going to use the gun debate, but I don't know if it's a really good example. But this is a good example of of homelessness, I guess, in general. Is one of the more conservative arguments would be that these people need to pick themselves up, right? That you can provide some kind of structure for them to operate within, but that you can't do it for them. and because people are inherently kind of flawed and lazy and don't want to do things if you give them things, so they're going to kind of take advantage, I guess, is the idea. They'll take advantage if they're given the chance. That's the more conservative argument, right? The more liberal argument would be that, these people have been subjected to a system that has done them wrong in some way. That society itself has done them wrong. Maybe their family has done them wrong. Maybe just the culmination of their experience has led them to this place where they no longer are able to help themselves. Thus, it's now responsibility of society and at large to help them, which is why you get kind of this more like bleeding heart idea coming out of the left, right? Now, one of the things, the reason I'm bringing up this documentary is it's a very, very good case study into this. That's the word I was trying to think of earlier, because it demonstrates kind of what happens if you play out this model at a grand scale. Now, the thing I'm not going to argue for either. I'm not going to argue for the conservative or liberal argument. I'm going to attempt to not argue for one. I do think the conservative argument's a little bit more on par in this scenario, but I also think, like, and it's a kind of a cop out, but both sides are kind of right and wrong at the same time, right? There's when you take away, legal system provides a structure. That's what it's there for, ideally. A legal system. It's there to kind of provide to keep things reined in, so that people know that there's something they can depend on. If things go out of control, that there's a greater system that can kind of rein things back in. You know, if somebody takes advantage of you or does something wrong or something illegal, for instance, then there's a system that kind of snaps into play then and kind of corrects everything back to the right way or the right path, whatever, right? This is the ideal behind the legal system, at least, and at least the way I conceptualize it. And I think it's necessary, obviously, at some level, for us to have a functioning society that is able to have like commerce and economy in a sense, right? But you also have to be careful because it can become tyrannical. You know what I mean? Like the legal system can be used in a way that to kind of benefit individuals, to where it becomes so complicated in nature that it actually can punish the wrong individuals, or kind of allow people who are entering into that space with bad intent to win, in a sense, right? I think you see this identity within the legal system represented by kind of the defense lawyer, the kind of like sleazy defense lawyer that doesn't give a shit if you're guilty or innocent, but just kind of wants to work the system to get you off. This is the idea, right? That's one of the perverted, corrupted sides of the justice system that can come out, and this is one of the things that you hear the liberal side or the left kind of argue against a lot of the times. And why it's been defanged, I think, in a lot of ways, is because I think people identify not only that, like not that specific example, just like defense attorneys, but a lot of the laws that have been put in place as kind of benefiting certain individuals or groups, thus kind of subjugating the others, right, and creating others out of everyone else. And so we've defanged a lot of these laws because we want to allow for people to operate in a free society. We don't want them to be held back, all these kind of things. But it's like, where do you draw the line? You know, it's like, here's a good example. It's like, you can have the laws in place and you can have the officers out there enforcing them. This is what happened in the documentary. But if the legal system, the judge itself or whatever, it gets in a habit or kind of develops, I forget what it is, like jurisprudence, I think is the term. If there's like this, way of doing things that gets set in stone, where it's like, hey, you know what, this offense isn't that bad. One of the offenses they bring up in the documentary is urinating in public, right? Or defecating in public. This is something that goes on constantly around Seattle, apparently, and is a big issue because of the homeless problem. And there's no, they can't go into businesses and things like that to use the restrooms, so they go on the streets, right? And because this is the homeless problem is continually growing and they haven't found a way to solve the underlying problem, they don't have anywhere. They don't want to say businesses, you have to let them use the bathrooms because that's infringing on the right of the business to kind of refuse service. So they're like, okay, well, just don't enforce the law, right? And so then you have these officers that are caught in this situation where they're out there trying to enforce the law, but then when they drag people in for doing these, they can watch them, pee or urinate in public, and it's like a $20 fine, and they're back out on the street, right? And I'm not saying you lock them up forever, but like there's this cycle where it's like you play. It's not effective. The solution isn't effective, but because we don't know or don't have any other solutions, we just kind of repeat or reprint the same solution, like with our eyes closed, kind of in our fingers in our ears, going la 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 la, hoping it works. You know what I mean? That's kind of what's happened in Seattle, and I think that's what's going to happen on a grander scale with the United States if we aren't careful with where we go with this. Honestly, because there's this push on a grander scale to kind of, I think, take or defang everything in a sense, right? Make everything kind of soft in a way where it doesn't hurt anybody. And it stems from this idea of making sure that nobody's offended. It really does. It's like how can I stop myself from offending you when whatever you're going to be offended by is completely dependent on your perspective that I can't know by definition, right? I can never know what your perspective is because I'm not you. But you're telling me that I have to kind of, you see the lunacy, right? I'm getting like really kind of into a weird topic here that I wasn't expecting, honestly. But I guess the documentary really hit home for me because it was an eye opener too, because you have this natural inclination. I guess is what I'm getting to, is like you have this natural inclination, all of us do inside of ourselves, that we want to help people. I was listening to a Joe Rogan podcast yesterday about this. I forget which one it was. I'll have to look it up for you, but I will and post it for you. Anyway, they were talking about it's one of the recent ones. They were talking about kind of this idea that damn, I lost it. Just lost it right there. Oh, that you want to help people, right? Everybody kind of does have this natural inclination inside. You want to leverage that each individual wants to leverage to help people. The problem is it's very easy to kind of corrupt this drive. It's like something you can latch onto. It's something you can kind of. It's a really effective way to motivate people. I think is what we're finding out right now. Is like one of the really, really effective ways you can motivate people is to scare the crap out of them. Another way is to kind of make them feel as if they need to save people. Right? And what's scaring me about it is like, I think there's this, it's this, and I don't mean to offend anybody, right? By saying this, I'm not trying to attack, but I think there's this cult-like behavior developing within the United States, and it centers around groups like Black Lives Matter, some of the feminist organizations, the more radical left organizations. There's also this growing unrest on the right, I think, that's been there for a long time, that's now bubbling up too. Obviously, this alt-right kind of, I guess you could call it a white supremacy. But it's kind of different than that now because it's been more politically charged. So there's these growing radical groups that we've all seen. Everybody saw Charlottesville, and all the atrocity that came out of that, right? But then you also have these other groups, these other left groups that are now very, very radical. And the problem with the reason that I'm bringing up the left groups more than I'm bringing up the right groups is because the left groups are being embraced by mainstream politicians and political organizations. These are radical groups that are at the center of a lot of unrest, but our political leaders or leadership is defaulting or handing down the responsibility of leading people to these organizations. That is so dangerous. And that's partially why I'm sure you as a listener probably are confused as hell what you should do, who you should be right now, right? Because your heartstrings are being pulled on and tugged on. Every time you turn on the TV, the media, every single organization, doesn't matter what it is sitting there trying to pull you in one direction, using your heartstrings. Or maybe it's trying to get you angry. If you're on the right, if you lean more right, that you're probably, a lot of those organizations, I try to watch both. A lot of the right channels try to use more of an anger to motivate people. It's like, it's like this ignorance. It's like saying, look at how ignorant all these libtards are. This is how they'll refer to them, right? It's like, look, and it's like it uses this anger like they're trying to take something away from you, right? They're trying to take this American dream away from you, right? And then there's this other side, the liberal side, that kind of paints the right side as like this fascist like group that has this maniacal plan to kind of make the whole world white and essentially reenact Nazi Germany. It's like this. It's this weird kind of. Both of them are fantasy lands, right? That we're playing in, and that's why it's so confusing. I think for you listeners is like and for me as well. It's like it's confusing as hell in today's modern society to figure out who you should follow because there isn't anybody to follow. I don't see not one person out there that has any, like, even like a smidge of integrity, like even a bit, that speaks any kind of truth. The last true thing I've seen has been like Ricky Gervais. And at the same time, it's like it was true, but he used it as an attack. So it's like truth isn't very effective when it's used as an attack. I don't think. But at least he was speaking truth. It's refreshing to like kind of get through the bullshit and the fog that's out there right now. You know what I mean? It's just a cloud. It's a cloud of craziness and hysteria. A lot of it centers around started with this corona. It's like the coronavirus kicked off something, and now we're kind of in this haze, this tornado of sorts. We're we're Dorothy, right, in the middle of that tornado, and the house is going everywhere, and we're like, Toto's like flying around, and we're like, what the hell's going on here? And it's like, are we still in Kansas? Like, hell no, you're not in Kansas. Like, we're somewhere else, man. You know what I mean? Like, we're somewhere far off from Kansas. We're going to Oz, I think. And we got to figure out like how the hell. It's like we don't want to go back to Kansas. I guess I'm trying to. Maybe I should get out of the metaphor, I guess, or analogy. I always mix those up. It's one of those things. Anyway, one uses like, right? Yeah, whatever. Language arts. Woo! Obviously not my. Maybe it was one of my better subjects now that I think about it. Anyway, I'm getting very off topic. But we're in this haze, this confusion, and it's because there's a lack of leadership. That's 100% why. There's no leaders out there. Everybody's playing an ego game. And it's so blatantly obvious. And it's funny. It's actually comical to watch because they all think they're tricking each other. Because they are. They are all deceiving each other. Just they're not deceiving everybody. I think there's a lot of you out there that are listening to this that aren't deceived by that. Or shouldn't be. Because these people are playing you for fools. I'm not talking about one specific side. I'm talking about all sides. I'm talking about the media sources on all sides. They're all playing you for fools. They're all telling you that you're going to be... They are all trying to assert their worldview on you. That's what they're trying to do. It doesn't matter who it is. Like I said, there's nobody out there saying, "Hey, you know what? You should just kind of figure out what you like to do, man." You should. Hey, maybe you should like kind of, I don't know, vote your conscience. You haven't heard that in a while, right? Vote your conscience. The tribalism's gotten distilled down to kind of like a hyper potent form. In our political system, it's because of that it's hyper corruptible too. It's one of the things that I think I experienced when I was in DC. I wasn't there for a long time, and I don't mean to like disparage anybody I worked with because I worked with some wonderful people. Like I really did. There's wonderful people everywhere, and I really enjoyed the organization I was associated with too. Like it's there's a lot of positive things in DC too. There's a lot of people there with very good intention. As we've covered before in previous episodes, the worst things are done with the best intentions, man. It's one of the issues I think that DC is having as a I'm referring to it as a kind of a political panacea. It's like this, everybody has the best intentions. And everybody on all sides does. It's weird. It's like not everybody. There's obviously people there that are just playing the ego game, and they know they're playing the ego game. They're kind of, I would call those people sociopaths. You know what I mean? Like I think that's kind of the definition of a sociopath, is somebody that kind of manipulates people and knows it and plays it as a game, kind of uses people's emotions to bend their will, right? There's a lot of people that get into positions of power that operate that way, and it's because they are more dominant in certain ways, right? We haven't properly identified those traits in these organizations as things that we should steer clear from when we're trying to determine who should be in those positions of power. We haven't instilled the virtues inside of those organizations as well. And when I say instill them, I mean like enshrine them in some kind of verbal form, some kind of format that you can replicate and repeat and teach to people so that they know that this is what this represents, right? And that this is what you need to embody if you go up in it. And then it also requires that you have gatekeepers within that organization that do their job and don't promote people that are there for anything other than the role itself. And it's not like you want people there to just do the role. It's like you want the right person there. It's like the search is harder than we've admitted to ourselves in general. For all this goes for any organization, not just political organizations, right? It's like any organization. You need to. I truly and utterly believe that there's a person out there that is a perfect fit for every role you can think of. If you can think of a job, there's a person out there that not only could do that perfectly, but wants to. That wants to do that. But the problem is we have developed this system that's so rigid that tells people they need to go through it in a very linear way. And this linear path is always going to determine what's your best, what the best version of you is. And it's so backwardsly wrong that it produces things like the homeless problem too. I do think there is this it's not a question of nurture or nature, it's both. It really is. It's more complicated than that. We try to simplify things in this world down to something that's easier to digest, and it's because our egos are too small and too fucking insignificant to actually be able to understand what's going on around us, the complexity of any of this. But we are so kind of confined by that ego, we don't realize there's something bigger than that, something else. There's a bigger perception there. Like you, and I'm getting more spiritual now too, right? But like it's. For me, all of these things link together. They're all the same thing. You know what I mean? I don't I guess, and part of my goal with the podcast has been to try to link these perspectives together for you all as listeners as well. So that I think for one, that there's to illustrate or show first that there is a philosophical perspective, because I don't think anybody thinks that way anymore. Right? I don't think we've taught that way of thinking in school, and it's a method of thinking that has to be kind of taught the same way. It's like a language, it's a method of interacting with the world and playing with ideas, and it literally is kind of a different perspective that you take within yourself to organize those ideas and to kind of develop new ones and novel ones. We haven't taught those kind of skills within our educational system. We've only taught the STEM things. Right? The things that are very kind of fixed and linear. And because of that, we've gotten a lot of jobs out there that pay really high wages, that give you really good careers, that focus only on the STEM fields. And we get a lot of jobs out there that don't pay anything, that, are artistic based. Or philosophically based. That leverage these other perspectives. They're spiritually based. Right? Is one of the downsides, the negative aspects that we don't like to associate with capitalism. This is one of the offshoots of it, is yes, when you set up a system that kind of automatically promotes within the thing that produces the most profit, essentially, then what you automatically create is a disincentive to produce anything that doesn't make profit. But that assumes that money itself is the only thing that holds value, which is not true. It actually holds the least value. It holds no intrinsic value. Money does. It's an intermediary. So what we did with capitalism, this system, and it works for a while until you get to where we're at now, right? And I'm not trying to argue for communism. I want you to, or a planned economy. I want you to understand that as well. But I am arguing for, like I was saying, trying to instill or enshrine within each of these systems some idea of virtue. I am trying to get through or work out how you do that, but I think there's something to speaking it into being. When I say that, I mean like we need to enshrine it. It's like in government, I think I've said this many times, I think the founding fathers really messed up fundamentally, and it's not like, it's like they were imperfect. It's a good thing to view them that way. We view them as these godlike figures. That's so unhealthy, but we need to view them as these figures that were fallible. And I think one of the ways they messed up is they assumed that that there would be this basic, fundamental, foundational, I think, Christian virtue system carried on through religious freedom, I guess, is the idea. Like it was because, and I think not only Christian, it's like I think the founding fathers understood something deeper than that. I think most of them did. If you read any of them, like Benjamin Franklin, or I haven't read a lot, but a little bit of Benjamin Franklin, I guess, right? Thomas Jefferson, but I think they were such intellectual figures, and they were all very like kind of enigmatic in ways. But I think one of the things they must have recognized is this universality of virtue. Like, I don't think there's no way they didn't identify this, right? And I think there is a universality of virtue that you could recognize within the religions, regardless of where you find them. I think one of the reasons that they used or identified with Christian religion more often than Eastern religion is Christian religion is much more focused on enshrinement of ideals. So, like, I was just watching a video by Alan Watts earlier today, and he was talking about how, like, Eastern religion and specifically like Zen Buddhism or Buddhism itself kind of focuses more on the practical or the philosophical, like watching your life and taking your drawing from it, right? Learning about it and recognizing that it's all kind of one thing. Whereas, so in a sense, like the teachings of the Buddha are like life lessons, right? They're very practical things. Whereas in Christian religion or Western religion, I guess, there's this more of a in the head kind of thinking of things. A lot of the religious aspects of it comes from this interdialogue within yourself, between you and this deity, right? And that there's this virtue that comes through in the idea of that deity, the idea of perfection. It's kind of this intellectual exercise, I think Western religion is, where it's like you go inside of your head and you try to imagine perfection. Not just like any perfection, your perfection. Right? That's what the idea of Jesus is, like the representation of him is, I think, inside of people, is the perfection inside of all of us. Right? It's not that you will ever be that, but it's that you can imagine it. And so it's like you think you can imagine it, right? So there's something to trying to get to that perfection, right? And what that does for you is lays out a path, a map of sorts that has like virtues as guardrails. And those virtues are the things that are universal, that kind of guard, like I said, that can be translated between that Western interpretation of religion and the Eastern interpretations. And so that translation is something that needs to take place. And we need to, as a society, as a culture, I think as a country, kind of recognize that value in those virtues and then distill them, pull them out of those religions and enshrine them, define them inside of our legal structures. So that and I'm not saying it in a punitive sense. I want to make that very clear. I'm not saying that you like punish people for being, I think like in certain ways you could define how that like aligns well, like the wrathful, right? Or the opposite of the virtues, right? Being wrathful would probably align with like things like murder and those kind of things, right? So you can understand how they already kind of line up, but it's not like you would have like a direct punishment for wrath, right? I'm not trying to envision a system in which you like, it's punitive if you're not like, courageous, right? I'm not trying to say that. I am saying we need to figure out a way to identify that those are things we need to hold inside of each individual and represent inside, like that each individual needs to find within themselves if they want to properly embody whatever they need to do in this world. And that there is a deep necessity behind, like, inside of that this is one of the fundamental assumptions that the Founding Fathers got so right, is that you rely on the individual, you focus on the individual, you create an environment in which the individual can flourish so that they can focus within, not in a selfish way, but in a self-critical way, so that they can develop the skills and traits necessary to realize their full potential. And that we need to create a system that does that better. We don't do that very well right now. We do a shit job of that right now. In fact, we actually disincentivize those virtues inside of people. I know that because I've been within systems that do that over and over again. I'm sure you have as well. I'm sure you've seen or worked in places where people that have cut corners have gotten ahead for it, right? And not only have they gotten ahead for it, but like it's like there's this agreement or this understanding that this is the way things are done now. And I see this popping up within many organizations. I think this is one of the issues within most political systems, organizations, and our political system itself. Is this corruption has gotten to a point? It's like a cancer. It's infected things. It's got to be cut out in a way. But when I say that, I don't mean it in a violent way. I don't mean to like as a call for action. I want to make that very clear, right? I'm saying like I'm talking about it and playing with the idea so that we can kind of see how we need to triage, because that is really the point we're at. I think people is like. We are at a crisis point in this country, and I think at a global scale, it's going to spread to a global scale, because whether other countries want to recognize it or not, though the United States has been the leader in the Western world and the thing that has pulled most of the world out of essentially the Dark Ages. At least for the last 100 years. And if that goes away, somebody else has to take that place, right? And I want to ask you one question. Who do you think is poised to take over that space if the United States fails? I know there's two countries that I can think of that have like the power and the audacity to try to do that. One being China and one being Russia. Maybe both of them together. Who knows? But I'm not trying to get doomsday either. I'm just trying to, like I said, I'm presenting this. Like, you don't, as kind of a thought experiment, we don't want to be too drastic with what we do with the United States. And I'm actually kind of talking more towards like U.S. citizens, right? Like we as citizens don't want to tear this thing down. I hear a lot of I feel this like call for revolution, that's been building and building and building, and this idea kind of kernelized, I think, around, it was right around when Trump got elected, because there was this hysteria, this panic, like, oh my God, 4 years is such a long time. We need to overthrow this thing or something, I felt, because like I said, when I was at the time, like I just gotten to DC, or just, it was right after the election that I went to DC. So I was like, and I was studying politics. So like, this is what I lived and breathed every day. And I was very, very far left. I just, so like that's kind of where I sided on the political spectrum at that time. And I noticed when I went to, not only when I went to DC, but kind of with like the organizations that I would engage with, the information sources that I would engage with. Like, I used to really like to listen to one of the podcasts was Pod Save America. I loved that one. What was the other one? There's a bunch of them. I listened to The Weeds constantly. That was another one I really liked. That podcast. But anyway, like I would go through, and what I noticed is like there was this growing kind of uneasiness with like what had gone on and how we solve it, and there was this like rooting for finding any way to get that out of there, and it led to this, I think, this radicalization that over the last 4 years within the liberal kind of political movement in this country to feel like there needs to be a revolution of sorts, I guess, and I think that's so dangerous. It's so dangerous. Like revolution is not, and we as American citizens don't have the correct, we don't conceptualize revolution properly. Like, we think of it as this good thing because the American Revolution went so well for us, right? But if you look at revolution in terms, like historical terms, it's a very, very negative connotation. Revolution usually means a lot of death and suffering, and usually a worse system after the fact, most of the time. Like, that's the rule. We're the exception to the rule. We really are. We were a flaw. Like, we're a fluke in a sense. Like, that's we should consider ourselves lucky in a way that we're still here, because this was an experiment of sorts. I do think, and one of the things we need to recognize as US citizens, as this election nears and as this chaos grows, because I guarantee you it will grow as we get closer to the election. You're going to feel more and more out of control because people are purposely doing this. The information you're being fed is being manipulated in a way, and it's being fed to you in a way because these egos out there want to manipulate your ego. They think they know how to control you. They think they know if they scare you or if they tug on your heartstrings hard enough, you're going to run out there and vote a certain way. And the closer we get to this election, because of all the craziness that's happened over the last 4 years, the crazier that's going to get, because I'm telling you, there's this radicalization that's going on. I think it's more politically apparent because the left is out of power right now, so you see it everywhere. Everywhere. But it's this idea that we're not going to lose, no matter what. I don't know if you guys feel this building, if anybody else out there feels this building, but I feel this feeling building of all of these radical groups, like I said, like these more radical feminist groups, these more radical, like the Black Lives Matter group, all of these kind of gender rights activist groups and things like that. All of these groups are getting more radical because they're done. They're not going to put up with Trump, 4 more years of Trump, all this kind of stuff. And I feel this growing call for like a revolution of sorts, and it's dangerous. It's so dangerous, right? And I guess the reason I'm bringing it up is we and the reason I brought up that documentary is we have proof, guys. We don't want that kind of revolution, right? There's been proof throughout history, especially in the 21st century, the 20th century. If you want to look at the 20th century specifically, if you want to look at how much pain and suffering these kind of ideas can cause, you can look through the 20th century, the history of it. There's millions of examples of how much suffering it can cause. You know what I mean? In the form of millions of dead people from, socialism and communism. Now, I know people hate when you bring up that term, those words, because it's like, well, that's, again, it's attached to this feeling of feeling like a good person. It's like, well, I want to, everything should be equal. Everything should be ideal. Everybody should have a fair shake. Everybody should. And it's like, you're not wrong about a lot of those things. I'm also going to tell you one other thing. I don't know who told you this or who convinced you of this. It probably was yourself, but the world isn't fair. You don't get to have everything just because you decide you want it. It doesn't work that way. That's part of the problem with all of these radical groups, is they just get more radical. And then they get to that point where they say, you know what? No, I am all there is. And I don't care. And this is how it's going to be. And we're going to make the rest of the world change to us. And that's exactly how you enact absolutely horrendous things in this world. And I see that coming. So these groups need to be careful with what they're playing with. Be real careful. Because on the flip side, there's also, I think, within this country, a very, very strong, like, identity. That it's almost like you don't want to shake it awake. Right, like it's the same thing. Like it's like after Pearl Harbor, that general was quoted as saying, one of the Japanese generals was quoted as saying, when we've awakened the sleeping giant, kind of this ominous, quote, that foreboding quote of what was to come, and I feel that kind of here too, and it's odd that I feel that sensation here too in this time frame, because like. It also coincides with coronavirus, right? And I don't know if any of you listened to... I didn't actually listen to it. There was a Joe Rogan podcast recently that he interviewed. It was one of the Weinstein brothers, whichever way you pronounce it, I can't remember. Anyway, and he was, talking about kind of the eeriness or kind of how there's a lot of signs, I guess, that this coronavirus thing could have been manufactured. That we originally didn't want to kind of admit that or play with the idea that this could have been manufactured or intentionally released. But there's a lot of clues pointing that direction, one of them being that kind of mutations don't happen that fast in nature, essentially, is the argument, right? Again, I didn't watch it, so I don't want to present too much or something I don't know. I don't want to espouse it as fact, right? But I will listen to it, and maybe we can talk about it in another episode. But I do think that there's this weird, like the reason I brought it up is like I do fear this weird, similar, eerie feeling of like you don't want to wake a sleeping giant. And I brought it up in context of kind of the more radical left groups in the country right now. I do mean it towards the radical right groups as well. I just don't see them as much right now. Like I said, it's like because the right is in power in a sense in the presidency. You always see this, like whatever group is in political power, they tend to be a little bit more subdued, because they feel like they're being represented, so they don't feel like they need to lash out as much, but then like as soon as that switches, the right will, like if let's say that Biden wins, the next day after, you're going to see the radical right groups go through the freaking roof. Like it's the same thing. It's the same people. It's people, man. It's like you're no different. This tribalism is if you're better than the other person. That's one of the issues that I really disagree with on the left, is like this identity that's like been developed that says you're only a good person if you believe in the left values. And it's like, no. You know what I mean? That's what I'm talking about, pulling on your heartstrings. There's this really insidious way that the left has recruited people, especially young children in school, to tell them that there's only one virtuous way of living, and it's this way of life. It's this left-leaning political worldview that you have to take on, or else you're a bad person. This is what's been taught to people for the last 20, 25 years. And it's one of the issues, because it's what shows you that there's an evil thing growing within that side of the aisle right now that it won't grow on the right as well, and it has before. But we need to watch for it, guys, because there's this sleeping giant quality, and it could, like, we don't want revolution here, but because we also have other things that may be affecting this. We may have other countries. Like I said, there's a real possibility that China may have released this intentionally. You need to play with that idea for a second. What if they did do that? Why would they do that? There's only one real logical answer for that, and it's to sow division, to sow chaos. Exactly what's happening right now, guys. So if you're on one of those radical sides, either of them, I didn't mean to kind of only focus on the left side. Again, I don't want to kind of, I'm trying really hard here not to make anybody feel singled out, right? But any side, if you feel like the best thing to do is double down on what you've already assumed is true, you're a 100. That's the one thing that will demonstrate you are wrong. The one thing that we need to realize globally, and I don't know what it's going to take to realize this, but it's that we're all so fallible, man. Like we need to figure this out. Like that we are not all the correct at the same time. It can't happen. Fairness doesn't exist. That's the idea of fairness distilled. Everybody thinks that they can be right at the same time. Essentially, you can't. It's a lunatic idea. It's a lunatic idea that we're actually trying to enact into reality, and the process of enacting it into reality is tearing apart our society at the seams. And so we have a responsibility, each of us do, to kind of not focus on the outside, the external, but to go inside, to work on yourself, man. To focus on what's messing you up as an individual, in what ways you're not treating people around you correctly, or what responsibilities in your life you're not taking proper care of, and fix those things so that you can be the thing when more responsibility comes your way, you can pick that up. But you don't go out looking for more responsibility before you're ready for it. It's one of the issues I also saw when I was in DC, is there's a lot of people that think, hey, I went and learned about this, and now I'm the thing that can solve all the world's problems. And then you have literally, how many people live in there? I think it's like 490-some-thousand people in that city, just in the city itself, not in the outskirts, that all think that they're there to solve and fix, you know what I mean, to be the one thing that fixes everything. Nope. If you were ready for that responsibility, you were ready to be in that position, trust me, like, that position is going to find you. You know what I mean? Especially in today's day and age. Like I said, there's a lack of leadership, a void of it. So if you have any kind of leadership quality at all, it stands out like a sore thumb right now. Don't go chasing for shit you're not ready for. We have a lot of people doing that. It's not an age thing either. There could be somebody very young or somebody very old that could equally be as inexperienced or experienced, or ready for or not ready for whatever position it entails. I think there's certain aspects I think one of the things that makes a leader that is recognizing, one, that they can't get their clues or they can't get their answers from things around them. I have talked to so many people throughout my professional career, and career, and do you know what every single one of them said? or when I've ever talked to them, or not directly, it's not like I've asked every single one of them, but in every single conversation, it's always like, in some ways, you've gotten either this vibe from people, or they've said this, that everybody thinks that they're a good leader. I know you know this is true. I know you felt this or seen this too. It's hilarious. It's absolutely hilarious. But everybody out there, nobody realizes that most people are shit leaders. Most people are. It's actually it's the flip, like it's the inverse of what people present. It's like people present as if most people can be leaders. That's what most organizations would like to believe, and so they've developed this system in which they can make a leader. And it's like, no, you can't. No, you can't, because the leader's created internally. They have to choose that path. A leader is somebody that gets their clues from the inside, that knows intuitively what direction is correct and what direction they should take, and that's what causes them to lead other people that way. Get it? You don't get to sit and watch the world and be like, oh yeah, I'm going to do what they did. Follow me. That's not leadership. Look at any significant leader throughout history. They did something groundbreaking that had never been done before. Or they ventured off into some wilderness. Or they said something, or they did something that was radical, and it caused people to wake the fuck up and look, right? And then they follow when that happens. That's what leadership is. It's rare. It's very, very, very rare. The state of the modern world should demonstrate to you how exceedingly rare real leadership is. And that we are starving for it in the modern day. And that the only way we're going to find where our leaders lie in this world is by each of us turning internally and figuring out if we're enough to even handle the shit that surrounds us. Let alone the responsibility or weight of being something like a president or a senator or a whatever. Or a cop. Or a what? I mean, all of these entail huge responsibility. Yet we don't do the internal work to see if we're even the thing that can handle doing the fucking dishes. But here's a gun? Or here's like control over deciding what the populace is best for the populace? This is the problem. We need to realize, and we need to figure out a way. I'm kind of talking through this, I guess, or talking to myself, because like I said, I listen back to these myself, and I don't edit them first. I just listen to them. So I can have the same experience you have. Because I think this is how you lead yourself or other people. I'm trying to bring that dialogue into a space where you can visualize it. This is what should happen internally for you every day. You should be talking to yourself this way and figuring out where the fuck you're flawed and what you need to do today and what you didn't do properly and how you can put yourself back together again, and just recognizing how deeply and utterly incapable of being perfect you are every single day, and then choosing to be the thing that still tries to be it even though you know you can't. That's life. That point, that path, that way is when you'll find like the truth of what you are, what you're supposed to be, and what you're supposed to do. That comes towards you once you fix everything else. But when we rely on systems to set up everything in a linear way and tell us, hey, all you need to do is check off these boxes, finish and complete these steps, and then you're going to be everything you ever need to be to realize your dreams. That is the worst lie we could have ever told somebody or people. It's one of the reasons you have so many people that are homeless. We don't like to admit that, but that if there is any culpability that we have as a society, that's it. It's that we've failed to spark or recognize inside each of those individuals their unique capacity to be something beautiful and to provide something of novel value. The fact that they're living in squalor and their own like excrement demonstrates how much we as a society value their individual capability to produce that. I hope that we start moving in a direction that we each individually start finding within ourselves the thing that makes us hope you find whatever gives you the strength to follow that path, I guess is what I'm trying to say. Regardless of if it's what the religious name is called, or even if it is a religion. Like I said, maybe it's something that you just are so damn passionate about, you can't ignore it. A person, a place, or thing. God, it's beautiful when that happens, isn't it? So follow those things. And I think that's leadership. You know what I mean? Man, when you see somebody that knows where they're going, you want to figure out how the hell they know that. Like, you know what I mean? It's like you see somebody that knows where they're going, and they're like, how did you figure it out, man? And there's a look about these people. It's literally a different look. It's like a spark in the eye. And you can find that yourself. But it's like very individual process. There is no generic map. It's yours. It's your specific map. You got to figure it out. And, guys, I think with that, I'm going to leave it there. I'm at about 50 minutes, and that went by really quick. I had a lot to say. This has been the last couple of weeks, the last month or so has been a really weird, I don't know if you can notice, but it's been a pretty rough or difficult time for me. As I kind of explained in the last episode, I had some things in my love life that were not going the way I really wanted to. I had kind of a realization that, the career path that I had kind of diverted to wasn't going to maybe be what I wanted it to be, right? But all of this has led me to a place, remarkably, where I sit now, where I'm like, oh my God, this is where I needed to be the whole time. I prioritized this. I found my calling. And I hope now that I can continue to develop whatever this is, so that it continually, like I said, demonstrates, I think, the process that has been successful for me. Now, no, I'm not sitting here with $1 million freaking dollars and all this shit, but I am sitting in a place where I am completely and utterly satisfied and happy. And I think you can be there too. And I think that, but I do think you have a choice, and nobody else can make that for you. And with that, that is the Unfounded Podcast signing off. I will be back at it soon, guys. I hope you stay safe out there, stay sane out there, and remember, you are not alone in this. You have every opportunity to live your best life, so do that. All right? And I will talk to you soon. Bye-bye.